Buju migwe chapiji gi pijaye go de nongom. Nin wagosh indigu minawa migizi and odem besho ode gazaga squaji mekag and dunjiba. Thank you everyone for coming out today. When they asked me to come and do a TED Talk, nobody said anything about using a foreign language like English. In fact, it still seems quite ironic to me that although English is the foreign language and I'm speaking to you in Ojibwe, one of nearly 200 tribal languages still spoken in the United States, that somehow mine is the one that often ends up being thought of as foreign. Now, if I held up my finger and asked you what this is, I could start a fight if I didn't clarify in what language. So, in the language of body parts, what is this? And it's a finger. But in the language of numbers, what is this? And it's 1. In the language of space, what is this? And it's up. And in the language of frequent public speaking, what is this? I got to go to the bathroom. Now, who's right? And they're all right. In fact, when we start trying to tackle some of the biggest problems of our time, like race relations, this is often what happens. Someone's up there talking, saying, you know what, this is a finger. It's not an elbow, it's not a toe, and the rest of you people need to shh. And someone's listening, saying, but that's a 1, it's not a 2, it's not a 3. See, they just don't understand. And we often misunderstand. So one of the challenges to help everybody thrive is to be able to look at things from multiple perspectives and look for adaptive solutions. Now, nobody sees the world the way that it is. We all see the world the way that we are, and we're all different. So I'll give you just a minute on me. These are my folks. My father, Robert Treuer, is actually not native. He was an Austrian Jewish immigrant, Holocaust survivor, spoke nothing but German the first 13 years of his life. He has an amazing story of his own, but in the interest of brevity, eventually he made his way to Minnesota, met my mom, and here I am. My mother was born in northern Minnesota and raised in the heart of the Leech Lake Indian Reservation in northern Minnesota, a little village called Bena. And for her, I think things like harvesting wild rice were less a cool cultural pastime and more a necessary means of survival. She knew what it was like to have half a potato for supper every day for a week. For me, when my folks were getting started, I guess my father was hitting the restart button. My mother was trying to find a pathway out of poverty. I never experienced poverty the way that my mother did, although there were times when we had no electricity or running water and washing up in the creek was the normal means of getting cleaned up. But by the time I hit middle school, my mother had become the first female Native attorney in the state of Minnesota, built a nice house. The economic profile for our family changed dramatically, and to me, it revealed some very important truths. One is the importance of education. And as I think about the things that can help people thrive, nothing seems more important. But when we talk about the American dream, work hard, good morals, you too get sweet American apple pie, I feel like that story is half true. Now, the true part is what I saw my folks do, and many other stories like it from immigrants and others who have found ways to thrive. But at the same time, I feel like it's only half true because there are barriers out there and they're not equitably distributed. They call it the American dream because you got to be asleep to believe that that's the whole story. This is my crew. I've got 9 kids. I've been busy. A couple grandkids. They've been busy. My wife's buried in the middle of the pile there, and she's from the Swedish tribe, so someone's getting along. This is the view off the front deck of my house. Among other things that happened when my folks were getting started is my father had acquired a piece of property that had originally been a virgin white pine forest, clear-cut and turned into farm fields. And my father started planting trees. In fact, he planted all of the trees you see in this picture here. It completely transformed the landscape. And when I think about the big problems that we're trying to tackle in the world today, things like climate change and race relations, all too often, I think some of my fellow citizens look at that and they think, there's no way that I can do anything about that. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my kids to be decent people, and I hope that's enough. But it's not enough. All that's necessary for evil to triumph is good people to do nothing. Wealth will self-perpetuate, and so will poverty, and so will racism. Those things need to be interrupted through intentional action, and I liken the interrupting to planting the seeds. Now, when my mother pursued her law degree, she actually went to law school in Washington, D.C., and I was brought back and forth between the reservation in northern Minnesota and our nation's capital, going back and forth from being an Indian to being the Indian. And it was quite an experience. Among the things that happened, everyone in my class was either white or black, and I was the only brown kid, and a boy with long hair at that. Many considered it quite a novelty. My first grade teacher actually dressed me up like a girl in front of class, barrettes, makeup, and all of that. They had a good laugh. Now, I come from a long line of ferocious warriors. There's no way I was going to cry about that. So I did come home and say, Ma, I want a haircut. And I got it. I never told her what happened till I was an adult. My second grade teacher was black, the only teacher of color I've ever had, K-12, college, master's, up to my PhD, which, by the way, is the most common educational experience for Native kids in this country, never to have a teacher from their racial group. My second grade teacher treated me like a normal human being. It was such a relief. I tried to write left-handed because the teacher was a lefty, even though I'm right-handed. Third grade, I froze like a deer in the headlights. I was even a self-selected mute for a number of months in third grade, simply trying to protect myself from perceived persecution. This is an experience that a lot of people of color share, one way or another. This kid was a foster kid in Texas, and the school regulations simply said you need to have a haircut above the collar to go to school. It wasn't just mean people, but there was a systemic array that normalized one perspective. Oftentimes, I think white Americans look around and they can see the Dakota Access Pipeline protest or the poverty at Pine Ridge or perhaps, protests in Ferguson or Baltimore. And sometimes it's hard to connect all of the dots. But oftentimes for people of color, there's a little something, a little microaggression or misunderstanding, and there's so many of these things, they're not like dots, it's a solid line. See, they just don't understand. It could be a high school team that has a Native mascot, so the opposing teams show up with banners saying, "Hey, Indians, get ready to leave in a trail of tears, round 2, hi hawaya, hi hawaya." It could be any number of things. And oftentimes, I think our predominantly white teaching corps titters around on eggshells, unsure how to help people who are different from them thrive. 5.6% of American teachers feel prepared to work with students from cultural communities different from their own. But you can be sure that all of them will have to. Already, the majority of the K-12 kids in America are students of color. Only a little over half of them are reaching the finish line with high school. It can't be a recipe for a healthy nation if our largest demographic of kids is only getting to the finish line a little over half the time. Somehow, we're going to have to start listening to other perspectives. The late, great Malcolm X one time said that we cannot teach what we don't know, and we can't lead where we won't go. A lot of times when we start to talk about these things, we end up talking in sugar-coated language like diversity, which means let's do the Feast of Nations, everybody bring your dish and we'll all say they taste good, but avoids the heavy lifting. Or we'll talk in terms of inclusion, which oftentimes boils down to we have this big, beautiful basket of whiteness and everyone can come have a spoonful. So people of color get invited to the game, but there aren't always assurances that they'll get to see, much less play, or have equal access to opportunity. In spite of these problems, there are some stunning success stories. I get to lead our Hawaiian field program from our university, and we bring students to the Big Island of Hawaii. There are actually 22 schools that are operated in Hawaii as Hawaiian medium schools, meaning that the Hawaiian language is the medium of instruction. Among the other things that they do there is a culturally informed pedagogical approach. At the start of school, every single day, the entire staff is waiting in front of school. Teachers, janitors, cooks, administrators, they're all lined up waiting for the kids. And the kids get dropped off, and they line up facing the staff, and then the kids have to sing, asking for permission to come into the school. When the staff feels they're sincere, they sing back and welcome all the kids into the school, and then every kid gets a hug from everybody who works there every single day. Aloha. Now, to outsiders, it might sound like a cultural curiosity, or maybe even a luxury, like the kids are awake in the morning. Shouldn't we be working on academic English and math? But consider this. Truancy rates for students of color are disproportionately higher than they are for white students. At some schools, the truancy rates are as high as 50%. These schools have no statistically significant truancy problems. They can work so much faster at everything by speaking to someone in their cultural language. I can tell you that half of the Native American kids in this country are failing the state-mandated tests in English and in math. But in the state of Wisconsin, there is an Ojibwe language immersion school called Wadu Kodading, where they've had a 100% pass rate for 15 years in a row. Now, if someone's figuring this stuff out, maybe we should pay a little more attention to that. All too often, our policymakers and problem solvers are like the Far Side commercial at the School for the Gifted, where the sign on the door says pull, and they're busy pushing, saying, how come we can't help Native Americans thrive? A lot of times there's pushback, and people are afraid that if people of color somehow rise or thrive, that our economy and our world's like pie, and someone else is going to have to take a thinner slice. But the reality is, if your neighbor's house value goes up, well, yours goes up. If your neighboring nation is rich and prosperous, you get a border like the one we have with Canada instead of the one we have with Mexico. Senator Paul Wellstone said it best. We all do better when we all do better. My family both exemplifies and defies the statistics that you've heard and the stories you've heard about Native American people. I feel like most human beings are kind of like water rushing down the mountain. They follow the gorges and paths of least resistance. But once in a while, someone stands in the torrent and redirects the flow. I do feel that my mother was one of those people. Her brothers, I think, followed the flow and often paid a heavy price. Last year, we buried one of my uncles. He had pretty much burned out his liver drinking. We buried another one several years ago from a drug overdose. My aunt, also from a drug overdose. Even my grandfather, who was a decorated veteran from World War II, Omaha Beach, committed suicide at age 86. He was still sitting up when I found him, and we brought him out, had to roll up the carpet. Experiences like that really can change you. Now, at the same time, of the 4 children that my parents had together, My youngest brother is a medical doctor. We consider him the loser. Hey. My sister has a law degree. She's a judge now. My other brother and I both have PhDs. We've published 20-some books between us. I think all of the kids collectively have around 15 grandbabies for my folks. And everyone's doing okay. The adults are load-bearing citizens. The kids are going to school. And everybody wants to know, how did that happen? In a place that seemed to take so many people down around you, how did it turn out differently? And my mother will say, I don't rightly know, but I do know this. I didn't just tell my kids to spread their wings and fly. I made sure they had roots. I emphasized education, but by that I don't just mean education from books. I made sure that they knew how to pick rice. I made sure that they knew how to snare rabbits. I made sure they had exposure to their language, their culture. And that made all the difference in the world, because nothing can stop an Indian who knows who he or she is. Indeed, for all of our kids in this country, no matter what their cultural background is, this is our challenge, and this should be our goal, to connect with them in their cultural language, to build their identity so they can feel good in their own skin. And this is a reasonable and attainable goal if we all just lean in. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you. Miigwech.